guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Irene and I'm a registered dietitian, and I'm back again with another pediatric nutrition case study, this time on the topic of feeding intolerance. As always, this case study is 100% made up, but it is based on a variety of my experiences practicing as a dietitian. And today's scenario is patient B is a 7-year-old girl with cerebral palsy and intractable epilepsy. She presents to the hospital due to persistent vomiting that has been going on for several weeks. A few weeks ago, she tested positive for Enteral and had to be admitted, and since then, mom reports that patient B has continued to have issues with tolerating her feeds. Patient is currently on Boost Kid Essentials 1.5, 237 milliliters 3 times a day, run over 1 hour, and free water of 75 milliliters before and after feeds. Her anthropometric measurements are 15 kilograms weight and 103 centimeters height. Mom reports that she feels patient B has also lost some weight over the last few weeks due to the vomiting. Upon checking the chart, you find that at her last admission 3 weeks ago, she weighed 16 kilograms. So based on patient B's current anthropometric measurements, she's plotting at less than the first percentile for both her weight and her height. And we can find this out by either plotting her on the growth curve or using PD tools. If your hospital uses Epic, this likely is already plotted for you. So for her, because she is 7 years old, we're going to use the CDC growth curve. And so this is the one that we'll use, and we can either look at where her weight and her height would be on this growth curve, or we can use PD tools. This I find to be easier because it also gives you the z-scores and kind of just calculates everything out very perfectly for you. So from here we can also see that her BMI percentile is about 17% and her z-score for that is negative 0.96. So this actually isn't like terrible despite her weight and her height being on the lower end. Other anthropometric data that we want to consider are her weight loss. So she had 1 kilogram of weight loss over the last couple of weeks, and we want to calculate this in a percent because that is going to tell us whether or not this weight loss is significant. For example, if you are calculating 1 kilogram of weight loss on a 60 kilogram teenage boy, that is very different from calculating weight loss of 1 kilogram in like a 3-year-old. 1 kilogram in that teenage boy is going to mean a lot less than 1 kilogram in a 3-year-old boy. So it's always important to calculate things in terms of percentages. So to find the percent, we'll want to find the difference. So 16 minus 15, 1 kilogram. And we want to divide the part by the whole. So 1 divided by 16. And so this number, if you want to multiply that by 100, then you get your percent. So 6.25% weight loss in the last 3 weeks. This information can be very useful in classifying malnutrition. There are a lot of different ways to classify malnutrition in pediatrics. One of them being a height z-score of -3 or more. Another one being weight gain of less than 25%, both for classifying severe malnutrition. You can also use the percent of unintentional weight loss. So since she lost 6.25% of her weight, that would be mild malnutrition because 5 to 7.4% weight loss is mild, 7.5 to 10 is moderate, and then 10 or more is severe. Another way that you could classify malnutrition is using the BMI for age percentiles. So for her, since she is greater than -1, she actually doesn't classify as malnutrition here. So as you can see, there are like many ways, and some of them I didn't even touch upon, to classify malnutrition, and it's kind of up to like interpretation. Using all of this information, she could either be severe malnutrition or she could be mild malnutrition. Since we do know that she has cerebral palsy, some of her anthropometric measurements could be considered a little bit more normal because typically kids with cerebral palsy, they don't have a lot of length growth, and so we also don't want to grow them too wide or make them gain too much weight because then they're unproportional. And so given her current BMI, she seems to be somewhat proportional despite, you know, her BMI and her weight being on the lower side. And there actually are some cerebral palsy growth curves out there. We don't use these a whole ton in the hospital. I think that it's just good to know that they're available. That being said, there are different types of cerebral palsy. so it's important to know that like there are like different growth curves for each of the different types as well. So I have pulled up one of the growth curves here, and this one is for tube-fed patients, and as you can see, she is 15 kilos, so that's right here, it's on the outside, and she is 7 years old. So she's actually, while she's plotting in the low weight, still like about 25th percentile for cerebral palsy kids her age. So that's actually not too bad despite like already having some weight loss. And if you take a look at her height, you kind of see the same story as well. So centimeters are on the outside. She's 103. You go over here to 7. It's not super accurate because there's too many lines. So she's also plotting at about the 25th percentile for her height on the cerebral palsy growth curve as well. So this means that she's like rather proportional, although small. And that's like a big thing, is we want to grow proportional kids. We don't want them to be like too thin or too chubby or anything like that. We want to make sure that we provide them with enough nutrients to grow linearly and have the appropriate weight gain and not be disproportional. So for her, I would probably use the unintentional weight loss to classify her as mild malnutrition, because based on this like scenario, it seems like it's pretty acute and she otherwise grows pretty well given her condition and everything. And if you were to actually see a patient like this, you could check her growth history and see, has she been following that growth curve okay, or has she like kind of plateaued a little bit, or you know, seen a spike in her weight, and then make adjustments based off of that too. That's like a big thing as well, is like not just looking at, okay, this is where she's at today, but how has she been growing like overall over the last couple months or couple of years. Okay, and the next thing that we need to look at is what their home intake is and what it's providing them. So at our hospital, I would pretty much just pull up this calculator and type in all their information, and this would spit out exactly what they're getting. So this is something that I helped to improve upon in our department, and this is not a tool that is, you know, like widely available. Like our hospital came up with this, but if you don't have something like this, you can also just calculate things by hand. So if we know that 237 times 3 is 711, and then we know that this formula is a 45 kcal an ounce formula, you can divide that by 30 to get the total number of ounces that they're getting in a day, and multiply that by 45 and you get 1066.5. And you will notice that this is a little bit different from what we calculated with the Excel spreadsheet, and that's because Boost Kid Essentials is not exactly 150 kcals per 100 milliliters. It's actually a little bit more than that, and so that's what the discrepancy is here. Another way that you can think about this is that Boost Kid Essentials is a 1.5 formula, so that means there's 1.5 kcals per milliliter, so you can just multiply 711 by 1.5 and you get that same answer. So this is a really good way to calculate things if you don't have a tool like this that I have at my hospital. The dietitians, and me included at my hospital, are just like very anal and type A, and we like all of this very detailed information. And this is like one of the things that I worked on this year, is because like I wanted to make things more efficient in the department, and so this really helps with that. So it calculates a lot of information, not just the kcals. We also see the protein and the free water and a couple of other vitamins and minerals. Looking at the free water, they get 75 milliliters before and after feeds 3 times a day, and then they also get 555 milliliters from the formula. So that means that they're getting 75 times 6 plus 555, 1,005 milliliters of free water daily. And so with this information, we can kind of like look at the estimated needs. So calorie wise, because this patient is already on enteral nutrition, we kind of know what their growth looks like on that. We will base their needs off of their home intake. So if a patient has, for example, been gaining too much weight, they actually might need less than what their home intake is providing, and vice versa if they've lost weight. For this patient, their home formula is providing them 72 kcals per kilogram. So I'm probably going to dose their energy needs 70 to 80 kcals per kilogram per day. This kid has had some weight loss. This kiddo has had some weight loss in the last couple of weeks, but if their growth looked fine beforehand, then I would almost say that the weight loss is probably due to the vomiting and not really just like absorbing the nutrients. But I would move the top of that range a little bit higher just to account for like in case maybe they do need an increase in calories. So that's why I would do 70 to 80. If this kid was like gaining perfect weight as they were, I would probably just say 70 to 75. 72 is like kind of right there, smack dab in the middle, and that's how I do that. But because there's a little bit of weight loss, I would allow myself like a bigger range, also because I'm like not sure if the weight loss is like not actually getting enough, or just because we're having an issue with formula tolerance. For estimating fluid needs, we're always going to use Holiday Seeger in peds. For infants or children under 10 kilos, it's going to be 100 milliliters per kilogram per day. For kiddos between 10 and 20 kilos, it's going to be 1,000 plus 50 milliliters for every 1 kilo above 10. And then for kids that are more than 20 kilos, it's going to be 20 milliliters for every 1 kilo above 20 plus 1,500. So for this kid, it's going to be 15 minus 10, she's 5 kilos over, times 50, and then plus 1,000. So our 100% fluid needs are going to be 1,250. Typically, we aim for meeting at least 80%. So minimum that I'm gonna probably want to meet is about 1,000 milliliters. And so she's actually meeting that, and so that's fine. So then when I go visit with family and see the patient, there's gonna be a couple things that I want to touch on. One being confirming the home feeds. So making sure that whatever was in the H&P or in the last RD note is what mom has been doing at home. Sometimes, parents aren't doing what has been recommended, and that's why there's weight loss. Like they haven't been giving enough formula for whatever reason. So I just want to double check that that's not a reason for weight loss. I also kind of just want to talk with mom and see what she thinks the issue is. Sometimes parents, they really know their children, and they sometimes can provide me with a little bit more information. Like mom may be like, oh, I don't think it's the formula, or like, oh, I think it is the formula, or maybe mom thinks that it's like ever since they had that rhino enteral bug, they just haven't been the same since, or maybe it was like a new medication that they were on. There's lots of different factors that could contribute to feeding intolerance, and so getting that little bit of information from mom is going to be super helpful, not only in building rapport but also in just like figuring out what exactly to do. Sometimes I do see that after like some viral illness, patients just don't tolerate their feeds for whatever reason, and I think it's just because like viruses, they really just mess up a lot of things, GI included, and it can take some time for patients to recover from that. But obviously if a patient has been vomiting for a couple of weeks, we want to do something about it and not just like let them go home and be like, oh, just wait a couple of weeks. So we're going to want to see like what we can do to solve this problem. A couple of things that we will typically try is, let's first try some Pedialyte. Let's run it through however we would typically run the feeds and see if they tolerate that. So for her, it would be 237 milliliters of Pedialyte 3 times a day. Let's see if that works. If that works, for a couple feeds or for a day, we can advance to maybe half strength feeds. So that means the same feeds, 237, but half of it should be Pedialyte and half of it is going to be the formula, and see if they tolerate that at the same rate and everything. If they tolerate that, then we can maybe advance to full strength feeds. So basically their home regimen. Sometimes like kids, for whatever reason, when we get to that full strength feed, they don't tolerate, they start vomiting again. So we kind of have to backtrack a little bit and then back off. Maybe we just continue for half strength feeds for a little bit and then try again. Some kids, they just kind of need like a GI break for whatever reason. And then other kids, there's just a whole lot of issues going on and it's really hard to tell what it is. So another thing that we can try is just running feeds slower. So at home, if they're running feeds typically over an hour, maybe we run it over 2 hours or 3 hours. Or if they typically get a big volume, maybe over 24 hours and see how they tolerate that. That sometimes solves issues, and then it's just a matter of working to get back towards that home regimen, slowly increasing the rate and everything until we're back where we were before. Another thing that we could try is, if a patient is not already on a 1.5 formula, trying a concentrated formula. So if they're on Pediasure 1.0, for example, we could try Pediasure 1.5. And what this does basically is it condenses the volume that we have to give them. So you know, if we have to give them feeds over a longer period of time, this can be one strategy to shorten the time on the pump. Some parents don't feel like their kids tolerate higher concentration formulas for whatever reason. I don't have like a scientific reason for that, but parents just sometimes feel that way, and that's totally okay. It just like doesn't give us as many options to work with. And then if we've kind of tried all these things and none of them help, I would probably recommend just switching to a different formula, like a more broken down formula. So Boost Kid Essentials is a standard formula, and what that means is the protein is like standard, intact, whole. So I probably switch to a peptide formula, and basically that means that the protein in there is more broken down. A analogy that we like to use in our hospital is like, if you think about a standard intact protein, think of it as like a pearl necklace. So it's that whole pearl necklace, and then a peptide formula then would be a string of beads. So, you know, the protein is now broken down from that pearl necklace to just a string of beads. And then an amino acid or elemental formula is, instead of that string of beads, it's broken down even more to just the individual pearls. And so sometimes explaining this to parents can help them kind of understand what the difference is between these formulas. And a lot of parents do feel pretty good and okay about switching their kids to a peptide or amino acid based formula because they feel that it'll be like gentler and, you know, easier for them to digest. And yes, it is easier to digest and more easily absorbable. So a lot of times parents are pretty okay with this. And when I'm selecting formulas to change them to, I typically like to stay within like the family of formulas that we're already in. So for example, if they're on Boost Kid Essentials, I'm probably going to pick Peptamen Junior because they're both made by Nestle. If a kid is on like Pediatric, for example, I'm probably going to pick Pediatric Peptide. Unless a family like has strong feelings about, oh, I really don't like this formula company, I want to switch to a completely different one. That's typically how I pick formulas. The only reason that I would probably pick something like different is if we've already tried that formula. Like for example, if we tried Peptamen Junior and they didn't tolerate, then I might be like, okay, let's try something else completely different. Kate Farms Peptide 1.5, and then we might do that instead. But typically that's how like I kind of decide, and parents typically also feel better about making changes when we're in that same family of formulas because it's something that they're like familiar with, unless they had really bad experiences with it. So that's kind of like the plan of care that I would discuss with parents and also with the providers. Now, when I'm writing my notes, these are the recommendations that I'm going to give. For example, if patient is already started on Pedialyte, I would say continue with Pedialyte 237 milliliters TID via G2. Advance as tolerated to half strength, then full strength feeds of Boost Kid Essentials 1.5. If patient continues to have emesis, recommend slowing feeds to run over 2+ hours or continuously. And if patient continues with symptoms of intolerance, switch to peptide-based formula Peptamen Junior 1.5, 711 milliliters daily via G-tube. Continue with free water of 75 milliliters 6 times a day via G-tube. As able, resume the home regimen of 75 milliliters before and after feeds. So I'm keeping this the same because this is still meeting 80% of the fluid needs, and mom hasn't said anything about them having issues with constipation or being dehydrated or anything like that. And if patient continues to have weight loss or poor weight gain, recommend increasing feeds to 780 milliliters daily or 260 milliliters TID to provide about a 10% increase in kcals. So the reason why I'm not increasing the calories just yet, I want them to kind of tolerate formula first, is because I feel like the weight loss is due to not tolerating formula and the vomiting. So I want to hold off on that. I don't want to overshoot things. And so that's why I haven't made any adjustments to the feeding volume yet. Now, where this number came from, typically we shoot for about like 5 to 15% increases. And on smaller kids, I kind of like smaller increases. On kids that have had a ton of weight loss, I might make a bigger jump, but typically I stick to around 10%-ish. And that's because we never want to make these like huge increases because you can really oftentimes just overshoot things. We like to make smaller increases at a time, and also patients are more likely to tolerate these smaller increases versus a larger increase. And then lastly, I also want to make sure that we are obtaining weights while we're admitted because she's had weight loss, and we want to make sure that she doesn't continue to lose weight because that could be another issue that we need to fix before they get discharged. All right, so that pretty much wraps up this video. I hope that you enjoyed this case study. I also have a ton of other dietetics content on my channel. You can find all the videos in the dietetics playlist, and please be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.